What we're talking about when we talk about inflation, that's the rate at which prices are rising each year. It's a percentage number. And you can see that normally, in inverted commas, it kind of rises relatively slowly. So this pink bit is showing you what the area that the Bank of England would like to have inflation close to. And you can see for most of it, that's going back to 2014, for most of that period, it's pretty close to that. Now look at what happened in the cost of living crisis. Wow, it went up really, really sharply, up to more than 10%. That obviously was the period that we've all been living through and understand what that means for prices, for our pockets. But this is what's happened now. So inflation has come down and down and down and down. And the latest data is this 2.3% in April. Now, there's a few provisos over this, OK? 2.3, it's great that it's within that level, but economists thought it might come down even further, so getting towards 2%. Secondly, when you look at other measures of inflation, so you can look at this and also strip out volatile stuff, that's not down quite as much as expected. When you look at services, so not just goods, that's not down quite as much as expected, all of which is to say, when economists saw this and people in the market saw this, they were suddenly like, oh, hang on, we thought the Bank of England was going to cut interest rates in June, or at least a lot of people did. Now, they're not so sure. So maybe it might be August, maybe it might even be later than that. But here's the other thing that's just worth bearing in mind, OK? I want to just take the same line, OK, so prices, and rather than looking at annual change, OK, percentage, let's look at the absolute level, OK? So this is the level of prices. You can see it goes up and up and up, and with levels of prices, they just do tend to kind of go up and up, and I'm afraid. But here's the thing, OK? That's the cost of living crisis. Suddenly, we went up from prices being around there to prices being there. And you don't really see that in this data, OK? Because inflation is really just measuring the difference between that and that. And if you look at those two lines, you're talking about a 2.3% change. That's the number we're talking about today. But for a lot of people, it's not about that. It's about the difference between this and that. And when you look at the difference between this and that, that's 20%. And I think that's the dichotomy here between these inflation numbers where it looks normal and this, which is really not normal at all. So I think this is what people are going to be absorbing. And if you're wondering, hang on, you know, why is this number so low? Well, that's the explanation. It's mostly looking at that, none of which is to say it's not good news that it's come down, but we're still nursing, I think, that pain in many of our pockets.
He was very keen, was he not, to point out that interest rates are not down to him. The Bank of England is independent. He'd be very relieved if they did come down a bit, though, wouldn't he? And the IMF, I think, is saying they need to come down. 3 interest rate cuts this year is what we need.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Bank of England says 3 interest rate cuts this year. Actually, within the markets right now, they've trimmed it back a bit, so they're saying maybe more like 2. But even so, even if you have to wait an extra month for those interest rates to come down, it does look like the Bank of England is kind of just waiting for that moment. And we do get another set of inflation data before they make that decision. So obviously we'll bring that to you, and everyone's going to be looking at that numbers, hoping that this time it actually does go in line with what economists are expecting. Because, you know, those interest rates, they're very painful for many families out there around the country.